Okay, so picture this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table, it's a Sunday night, and you've got one of those retirement calculators pulled up on your laptop. You type in your age, your current savings, maybe a modest return rate, and then you see it, the number, $2 million. dollars. And for a second, your whole body kind of relaxes, right? Because $2 million sounds like made it money. That sounds like yacht money, like never worry about a grocery bill again money. Honestly, for most of us, $2 million is this mythical number we've been taught to chase our entire working lives. Like if we just hit that mark, everything downstream just works itself out. But here's the thing nobody really tells you, and I think about this constantly. My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, not just how people make it, but what it actually converts into once they stop working, because there's this weird gap between the number on a screen and the actual life that number buys you. And almost nobody bridges that gap for people. They just say, hit your number, and leave you to figure out the rest. So today we're going to actually do the math, the real math, not the fantasy math, on what $2 million gets you in retirement in 2026. Because I think you're going to be surprised. Some of it's going to feel like a gut punch, honestly. Some of it might actually make you feel better than you expected. But by the end of this, you're going to understand something most people never figure out until they're already retired and it's too late to adjust. The number isn't the goal. The number is just a tool. And how you use that tool determines whether you're living a rich, comfortable life or quietly stressed out in a paid-off house wondering where all the money went. Let's get into it. So the first thing we have to talk about, and this is the unsexy foundation everything else sits on, is the withdrawal rate. You've probably heard of the 4% rule. Basically, the idea is you take your total nest egg, you withdraw 4% of it in year one, and then you adjust that amount for inflation every year after, and theoretically, your money lasts around 30 years without running dry. So let's do the math on $2 million. 4% of $2 million is $80,000 a year. That's your income. That's it. That's the whole engine. Now, $80,000 a year sounds like a lot when you say it fast, right? But let's slow down and actually feel it. That's about $6,667 a month before you even think about taxes. And I want to pause here because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. They see 2 million and their brain does this weird math where it imagines unlimited money, like the number itself is the income. It's not. The number is a machine that produces income, and the machine has an output ceiling. Think of it like owning a small apple orchard. You don't get to eat the whole orchard in one season. If you did, there'd be no orchard next year. You eat the apples that grow each year sustainably, so the trees keep producing for decades. $2 million is your orchard. 80 grand a year, roughly, is your harvest. And depending on who you talk to, some more conservative planners now suggest 3.5%, especially with people living longer and market volatility being what it is. You might be looking at closer to $70,000 a year to be safe. Why does this matter so much? Because this is the number that determines literally everything else in this video. Your housing, your travel, your health care, your kids' weddings, if that's your thing. All of it flows downstream from this one figure. And here's a small personal frustration of mine. So many retirement articles just throw around $2 million, like it's a finish line, without ever translating it into a monthly grocery and gas and Netflix subscription reality. That's what we're fixing today. Before you get emotionally attached to a savings target, translate it into an annual income number using a 3.5 to 4% withdrawal rate. That's the actual currency you'll be living on. Okay, here's where things get genuinely interesting, because $80,000 a year means something wildly different depending on your zip code. And I mean wildly. If you're retiring in, say, San Francisco or Manhattan or Honolulu, 80 grand a year is going to feel tight. Like, uncomfortably tight, especially once you factor in property taxes, HOA fees, and the fact that a decent one-bedroom apartment in some of these markets can eat 40% of that income on its own. In a high-cost-of-living city, $2 million can start to feel less like made-it money and more like carefully budgeted, no-surprises-allowed money. But now picture retiring somewhere like a mid-sized town in Tennessee or parts of Ohio or a lot of the Midwest and South, places with no state income tax, low property taxes, and a genuinely lower cost of living across groceries, healthcare, and services. In those places, $80,000 a year isn't just comfortable. It's actually pretty great. You could own your home outright, drive a nice but not flashy car, travel a couple times a year, eat out regularly, and still be tucking money away for the grandkids' college funds. And this is where I want to throw in a little digression because I think it's important. A lot of people get emotionally attached to retiring exactly where they've always lived. And look, I get it. Your friends are there, your church or your community is there, your favorite coffee shop where the barista knows your order is there. That stuff matters. Human connection is not a line item on a spreadsheet, but it's worth at least running the numbers on what your same $2 million would feel like 15 minutes down the highway, or in a neighboring state. Sometimes the emotional cost of moving is way lower than the emotional cost of financial stress every single month for 20 years. There's also this whole in-between option a lot of people don't consider: geographic arbitrage during retirement, where you spend part of the year somewhere affordable and part of the year somewhere you love, even if it's expensive. It's not all or nothing. Takeaway: don't just calculate your number. Calculate your number against your specific location. The same $2 million can feel like scarcity or abundance depending entirely on where you plant it. All right, I have to talk about this one, even though it's not fun, because if I skip it, I'd genuinely be doing you a disservice. Healthcare is honestly the single most underestimated expense in retirement planning, and it's the thing that quietly wrecks otherwise solid financial plans. Here's the reality. If you retire before 65, before Medicare kicks in, you're on the hook for private health insurance, and depending on your age and health, that can run you anywhere from $800 to $2,000 a month for one person. For a couple, you can basically double that. That's potentially $24,000 a year just to have insurance before you've even gone to a single appointment. And even once Medicare starts, it's not free. There's premiums, there's Part D for prescriptions, there's supplemental Medigap coverage a lot of retirees need because Medicare doesn't cover everything: dental, vision, hearing aids, long-term care. Speaking of which, long-term care is its own beast entirely. A private room in a nursing home now averages well over $100,000 a year in many parts of the country. A single multi-year stay can absolutely devastate a retirement portfolio that looked bulletproof on paper. I think about healthcare kind of like a home's foundation. You don't see it, you don't think about it day to day, but if it's cracked, everything built on top of it eventually shows the damage. A lot of people budget for the fun stuff: travel, hobbies, that boat they always wanted, and treat healthcare as an afterthought, like it's a fixed, predictable little line item. It's not. It's one of the most volatile and potentially catastrophic costs you'll face. So what do you actually do about this? A few things. First, build a specific healthcare sub-fund within your retirement savings. Don't just lump it into living expenses. Second, seriously look into long-term care insurance while you're still healthy enough to qualify for reasonable rates, because once you have a health event, that door can close. And third, if you're retiring early, actually price out ACA marketplace plans for your specific age and location before you pull the trigger, because the number might genuinely shock you. Takeaway: healthcare isn't a line item. It's a whole separate financial pillar that needs its own plan. Underestimating it is probably the single most common reason comfortable retirements turn stressful. Now let's talk about something that's less about spreadsheets and more about psychology, because honestly, I think this is the part that actually determines whether $2 million feels abundant or scarce more than any of the math we've done so far. There's this concept in behavioral finance sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. Basically, humans adapt really quickly to whatever standard of living they achieve, and then that new standard becomes the baseline, and we start wanting more on top of it. I've seen people with $500,000 in retirement savings living genuinely joyful, peaceful lives. And I've seen people with $3 million in the bank who are anxious and unhappy because they're constantly comparing themselves to a neighbor with a bigger boat or a sibling who retired with more. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. Do you actually know what enough looks like for you? Not for your neighbor, not for the version of you that scrolls Instagram and sees someone's beach house, for you. Because $2 million spent by someone who's clear on their values, someone who knows they want, say, 2 international trips a year, dinner out with friends twice a month, a paid-off modest home, and time to garden or fish or whatever lights them up, that person is going to feel incredibly rich. Genuinely, deeply rich. But $2 million spent trying to keep up with a lifestyle built for someone with $5 million? That person's going to feel poor, no matter what the account balance says. I'll be honest, this is the part that fascinates me most about money, more than the math, more than the withdrawal rates and the tax brackets. Money is this weird mirror. It reflects back whatever mindset you bring to it. Some of the calmest, happiest retirees I've come across weren't the ones with the biggest numbers. They were the ones who'd done the internal work of figuring out what actually mattered to them, and then built a lifestyle, deliberately, around that, instead of around some vague cultural script of what retirement is supposed to look like. Takeaway: before you retire, sit down and actually define your version of enough. Specific activities, specific comforts, specific priorities, instead of borrowing someone else's definition of a good life. Okay, this next one is a little more technical, but stick with me because it's genuinely one of the most important and least talked about risks in retirement. It's called sequence of returns risk. And basically, it means the order in which you experience market gains and losses matters enormously, even if the average return over time is identical. Here's the scary version. Imagine you retire right as the market drops 30%, like right as you start withdrawing that $80,000 a year. You're now pulling money out of a shrinking pool during the worst possible time, which means you have to sell more shares to generate the same income, which leaves fewer shares left to recover when the market eventually bounces back. It's like trying to bail water out of a boat that's actively taking on more water. The timing of when you start bailing matters just as much as how much water there is total. Compare that to someone who retires right before a big bull run. Same starting amount, same withdrawal rate, same average long-term return. But because the good years came first, their portfolio actually grows even while they're withdrawing from it, and they end up in a completely different financial universe 20 years later. This is genuinely one of those things that keeps me up at night thinking about, because it means two people can do everything right, same savings, same discipline, same withdrawal strategy, and end up in wildly different positions purely based on when they happen to retire. It feels almost unfair, honestly. So what can you actually do about something that's largely out of your control? A few practical things. Keep 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or cash equivalents so that during a market downturn, you're not forced to sell depressed assets. You just live off the cash cushion instead. Consider a more flexible withdrawal strategy, where you pull less during down years and a bit more during strong years, rather than a rigid fixed amount. And honestly, just build in some psychological preparation now, because knowing this risk exists before you retire means you won't panic sell everything the first time the market has a rough 18 months. Takeaway: $2 million invested in the market isn't a fixed number. It's a living, breathing thing subject to timing luck. Build cushions and flexibility into your plan so bad timing doesn't derail decades of careful saving. Last major piece, and then we'll bring it all together: taxes. Here's something that trips people up constantly. That $80,000 a year we calculated, that's not $80,000 in your pocket. Depending on where that money is coming from, a traditional 401k, a Roth IRA, a regular brokerage account, the tax treatment is completely different. If a big chunk of your $2 million is sitting in a traditional 401k or IRA, every dollar you withdraw is taxed as ordinary income, so that 80 grand might actually net you closer to 65 or 70,000 after federal taxes, depending on your bracket and state. If you've got money in a Roth account, though, those withdrawals are typically tax-free, which is a massive advantage. It's honestly one of the most underrated tools in the whole retirement toolkit. This is why the composition of your $2 million matters just as much as the total. $2 million entirely in a traditional IRA behaves completely differently than $2 million split across a Roth, a brokerage account, and some traditional holdings. Smart retirees often do something called tax bracket management, deliberately pulling from different account types in different years to stay in lower tax brackets, sometimes even doing partial Roth conversions during lower income years to reduce future tax burden. It's a bit like packing a suitcase for a trip with really different climates. You don't just throw everything in one bag and hope for the best. You organize it so you can pull out exactly what you need for whatever situation shows up. Takeaway: where your money sits, not just how much of it there is, dramatically changes your actual spendable income. A good tax strategy can add years of comfortable living to the exact same nest egg. So let's zoom back out for a second because we've covered a lot of ground here. $2 million using a conservative withdrawal rate gets you somewhere around $70,000 to $80,000 a year in income. Before taxes eat into it and before you factor in exactly where you're living, what healthcare actually costs you, and how the market behaves in those crucial first few years. That same number can feel like abundance in a low-cost town with a paid-off house and clear priorities, or like scarcity in an expensive city with lifestyle creep and no plan for the unexpected. And honestly, that's kind of the whole point of this video. The number isn't the answer, it's just the raw material. What actually determines whether $2 million buys you a peaceful, joyful retirement or a stressful, anxious one comes down to a handful of decisions that are almost entirely within your control. Where you choose to live, how honestly you plan for healthcare, whether you've done the internal work to know what enough actually looks like for you, how you structure your withdrawals to survive bad market timing, and how thoughtfully you've organized your accounts for taxes. I think a lot of us grow up believing that some specific dollar amount is going to unlock this permanent feeling of financial peace, like there's a finish line, and once you cross it, the anxiety just switches off. But it doesn't really work that way, does it? Peace of mind comes from understanding your numbers, being honest about your specific life and location and health needs, and building a plan around your actual values instead of some vague, borrowed idea of what retirement is supposed to look like. So if you're sitting there mid-career, watching that number on your retirement calculator, don't just chase the total. Start asking the deeper questions now. Where do you actually want to live? What does your version of enough really look like? Have you priced out healthcare honestly? Because the earlier you ask those questions, the more control you have over the answer. You've got more power over this than you probably think, so use it.